St. John the Philosopher here. If you've been paying any attention at all to social media and pop culture, you've come across the expression, live your truth. It's become one of the mantras of this generation, and it's exposed a glaring problem in the culture's understanding of what truth really is. Mankind's search for ultimate truth is at least as old as recorded history, and by all indications, certainly as old as civilization. It seems that as long as humans have gazed into the night sky or stood before a glorious sunrise, we've wondered about the big T truth, answers to the questions inherent to consciousness. I discussed those questions and some of the answers we've come up with at length in a series of videos looking at worldviews, which I'll link in the description. But that's not what this video is about. At the root of all worldviews is a foundational claim to absolute truth. An increasingly popular school of thought, however, is that all truth is relative. And while it may have a nice ring to some ears out there, this notion is one of the most easily refuted. First, we have to agree that truth cannot be relative and absolute at the same time. They are contradictory conditions. Next, we must realize that statements like all truth is relative or its close cousin, there is no absolute truth, are statements about the essential nature of truth. They assign attributes to truth that themselves must be either true or not true. The nature of truth is either relative or absolute. There is no in between. To paraphrase a friend of mine, there's no such thing as kinda pregnant.
No. There it is. That little pink plus sign is so unholy.
That ain't no Etch-a-Sketch. This is one doodle that can't be undid, Holmes Gillett.
So these statements are therefore absolute in nature themselves, and thus fail their own test. If truth actually is, at its core, relative, then that constitutes an absolute quality of truth, making the original statement false, and that's when the robot breaks down.
Illogical. Please explain. You are human. Only humans can explain their behavior. Please explain.
It's a logical paradox that has no solution, so it's certainly nothing you want to base your ideology on. As a scientist, I also have to add that the concept of relative truth would make science impossible. All scientific inquiry presupposes that the laws of the universe are absolute, that they are the same everywhere, have been the same, and will continue to be the same everywhere, all the time. Even if we don't fully understand it or have a complete explanation, there is a right answer, and all of our efforts are geared towards finding that right answer. There's nothing relative about it. Yet, there are a great many people out there who believe this wholeheartedly, and will argue it to the death in spite of its logical and practical failures. So what is it about this new spin on relativism that it's managed to claim so many young minds? Why are we hearing so much about it from our college students home for the holidays? Well, I think there are 4 elements that make relativism so attractive to this generation. First, modern American culture has placed an outsized value on its pluralism, making it a supreme virtue to consider all points of view to be equally valid, no matter how different.
Everyone's special, Dash. Which is another way of saying no one is.
This creates a logical dilemma, because holding up something as a value in one ideology that is seen as a vice from the perspective of another ideology makes the type of affirming pluralism today completely untenable. Relative truth solves this problem by placing all truth claims on the same level. It provides the veneer of an intellectual underpinning for the belief to rest upon. But again, we know this defies logic. Second, relativism's focus on the shared traits between various religious traditions from around the world provides an air of practical legitimacy. As the argument goes, all the religions have generally come to the same conclusions when it comes to a few basic ethical behaviors. Therefore, they are all equally valuable. Those thin points of congruence will always be trotted out as evidence, oddly enough, to prove that their notion of relative truth is true. But the fact is, the differences between religions are orders of magnitude more significant than the superficial similarities. Any clear-headed examination of any of the various worldviews shows that they utterly contradict one another. That in order for one to be completely true, all the others must be mostly false. And even if all of them are mostly false, that doesn't discount the idea that there is a completely true viewpoint out there somewhere. Third, and similar to the previous point, relativist thinking supposedly explains the fact that people can have radically different conclusions and experiences or even memories of the same thing. You know, they've made sitcom episodes about it where 3 characters retell a single event in 3 completely different ways. The relativists will point to these as 3 distinct truths. We used to simply call them differing perspectives. As amazing as human perception is, it's limited. Our hearing is selective, our memory is shoddy. We experience time only linearly. We can't see all sides of an object at once, and what we do see is limited to a tiny fraction of the light spectrum. And even then, our ignorance, our previous experiences, and our biases color everything over in our own unique personal shades. So every truth claim that comes from a human is tainted by him. Relativists acknowledge this reality by insisting that all of those perspectives can be true, even if they are decidedly contradictory. So in addition to flying in the face of science, relativism also dismantles the very basis of the justice system. What is a trial if not an attempt to assemble enough information through testimony and evidence to construct a story as close to the absolute truth as possible?
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Relativist theory would have you believe that all testimony is true in a way, even the misremembered and fabricated parts. One parable relativists will use is actually pretty indicative of all this: the elephant and the blind men. In this story, which has its roots in ancient Eastern philosophy, a group of blind men try to feel their way to an understanding of an elephant, with each coming to their own vastly differing conclusions. The relativists will tell you that this is an apt analogy for mankind's attempts to understand God, or the universe, or something like that. The thing is, the story itself raises the exact problems with relativist ideals that I have throughout this video, and it starts with the question, from whose perspective is this story being told? We on the outside, looking into this situation, have the objective point of view. We know what an elephant is, and we see it clearly in its entirety. On that basis, we can safely say that each man's conclusion is objectively wrong. An elephant isn't a spear, or a rope, or a wall, or anything else the blind men have deduced. All of those things have an objective definition that is completely contradictory to the objective reality of an elephant. So on what grounds can the relativists say that all these perspectives are valid? Lastly, and this is really what it all comes down to, the only real purpose of the concept of relative truth is to provide validation for morally questionable choices.
I don't go to school and I kill people. Whatever, I do what I want.
Look, I've heard relativists argue that truth is a concept exclusive to human consciousness and basically didn't exist before we showed up on the planet. I've heard them argue that since they don't know what the absolute truth is, that no one can know. I've even heard them say that they can't be sure that some basic points of ethics are ultimately true, only that they're useful. But these aren't things they actually believe. We know this because relativists behave as though all other types of truth are absolute. They believe in scientific truth. They believe in justice. They certainly put great stock in the ideas pushed by their relativist college professors and journalists and book writers and what have you. Only religious and ethical truth is simply a matter of individual election, it seems. Regardless of what people say with their mouths, you can know what they believe based on how they behave. When the relativist finds out their significant other slept with someone else, I doubt they'll accept the defense that according to their truth, it's only cheating if you give your heart along with your body.
Get away from me!
It was a mistake. I made a mistake, okay?
A mistake? What were you trying to put it in? Her purse?
No relativist will ever shrug their shoulders at being robbed blind because maybe the thief's truth was that all their stuff actually belonged to him and he was only taking it back.
Hand it over. Give me the phone. Okay. Bag too. Come on! All right, now get down on the ground. Get out! Good? Good, yeah. All right, count to 100. Thank you.
As of this recording, I've spoken with a good many relativists, and so far I can't report much success getting them to see the logical failure of their worldview. They hold on to it, very similar to religious conviction, which actually isn't surprising, since in this religion, they are their own God. I honestly don't know what we can do but to continue to plant seeds of doubt with sound reasoning and pray. Especially that last one. Jesus is familiar with giving sight to the blind. Tell me what you think of this video. What do you think about the rise of relative truth? What do you think is the best way to combat it? Discuss in the comments. In the meantime, be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more videos on religion, culture, and politics. That's all for today. This is St. John the Philosopher. Goodbye, God bless, and I'll see you in another video.